Hi, everyone. I honestly never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here we are. I, 38F, have been married to my husband Mark, 41M, for almost 4 years, or at least I thought I was. We lived a pretty normal life, or so I believed, and even though he could be defensive, bitchy, and weirdly dramatic about the smallest things, I chalked it up to quirks. Like, he'd get all sulky if I asked him where he'd been too long. Or he'd say stuff like, "God, babe, you're acting like my amon." Whenever I asked why he didn't respond to texts for 8 hours. Not cute, not endearing, just annoying. But there were little things, tiny stupid things that should have been red flags. For example, every few weeks he'd say he had to visit his mentally ill brother in Utah, and he'd act super put upon about it. He'd claim his brother couldn't live alone, needed him, or was totally dependent. He'd switch his phone off for entire weekends with the excuse, cell service is trash in the mountains. He'd come home exhausted, like he'd run an emotional marathon. I believed him, because why wouldn't I? I'd never met this brother, apparently too unstable for visitors, but his family backed up the story. Or so I thought. Then, about 2 months ago, Mark started acting even stranger. He looked tired all the time, snappy, annoyed. Like I was the problem for asking him basic questions like, "When are you leaving?" Or, "Should I pack you anything?" He'd mutter things under his breath, like, "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. No one appreciates what I do. If you knew how hard my life was." At one point he even said, "Honestly, I'm basically raising 2 households by myself." I thought he meant emotional labor with his family. Nope. He meant it literally. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that something felt off. Like the air around him had changed. Like he was always on edge. Like he was carrying a secret that was getting too heavy to hide. I just didn't know the secret was another wife. In Utah. Who thought I was the mentally ill brother he kept taking care of. Yeah, buckle up. So the first crack in Mark's whole circus act happened on a random Tuesday morning. He'd left early for work, and by work, I mean he left the house wearing sweatpants, claiming he had a virtual conference but needed to be in the office mentally. Whatever. I've learned not to question his logic too much because it usually ends with him getting bitchy and sighing dramatically like he's the main character in a tragic opera. Anyway, after he left, I was doing laundry, and I found something, a receipt. Not weird in itself, but this receipt? It was from a grocery store in Utah, from 3 days before, on a weekend when he said he was visiting his mentally ill brother. Okay, that part technically tracked. But here's the kicker. The receipt included a cake with "Happy Second Anniversary Heartsuit" written on it, a bottle of champagne, flowers, and a card that literally said in the description, "To my beautiful wife." I swear I stood there in the laundry room holding that stupid little crumpled piece of paper like it was a detonator. My brain tried every possible explanation that wouldn't make him a monster. Maybe they messed up the receipt. Maybe it was for his parents. Maybe he bought it for a friend. Maybe his brother has a wife. Maybe he's doing some weird kindness project. Maybe he's part of a cake club. But the sinking feeling in my stomach wasn't buying it. Still, I waited. I did the adult thing. The reasonable thing. I held on to that receipt all day, hand shaking, telling myself to breathe. Then he came home. He walked through the door humming, like he hadn't just accidentally left behind documentary evidence of a second family, and tossed a bag of takeout onto the counter. "Hey babe," he said, as if nothing in the universe was wrong. "You look tense." Yeah. No kidding. I didn't bring it up yet. Not then. Because something inside me whispered, "Wait. Watch. See what he does next." And oh, he did not disappoint. Alright, buckle up, because this is where Mark's stupidity evolves into a whole new species. So, remember how I said I didn't confront him about the Utah anniversary receipt right away? Well, the universe apparently decided to speed things along. The next morning, Mark was rushing out the door for another overnight stay with his mentally ill brother. Translation: he put on cologne, wore his good jeans, and styled his hair like he was auditioning for a boy band reunion tour. Right before leaving, he patted his pockets, froze, and said, "Babe, have you seen my phone? Please don't touch it. Seriously. It's got important medical stuff about my brother." Because nothing screams HIPAA compliance like begging your wife not to look at your phone. Then, he says, "If it rings, don't answer it." It freaks him out. I just nodded, but I swear I could feel my soul leaving my body in absolute disbelief. He might as well have said, "Here, honey, please go through my phone immediately after I walk out." He left in a hurry, and because the gods of irony love me, he forgot the phone on the kitchen counter. Literally sitting there. Unlocked. Screen lighting up like a Christmas tree. I told myself, don't look. Don't do it. But my hands were already reaching. And the second I picked it up, it rang. From a contact named Angel Heartsuit. Not his brother. Not anyone with a medical condition. Just Angel Heartsuit. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. Something inside me whispered, "Answer it." So I did. I said, "Hello?" And a woman's voice, bright, cheerful, absolutely comfortable, said, "Oh, hey babe, are you almost at the airport? Did your phone die again?" I didn't breathe. She kept going. "Your flight info is in the email I sent. And don't forget the ring this time, okay? I swear you'd forget your head if." I finally managed. "This isn't Mark." She went silent. Then she whispered, "Who is this?" "I'm his wife," I said. And that's when she hung up. I just stood there, shaking, holding the phone like it was radioactive. Whatever I thought I knew, whatever I thought I suspected, I was not prepared. My husband didn't just have an affair. He had a second life, a second woman, a second wife. I didn't even have time to cry. Didn't even sit down. I just stared at the phone like it had personally insulted me, then hit redial before my brain could catch up. She answered on the second ring with a shaky, hello. I said, don't hang up. We need to talk. There was this awful silence, then she whispered. I knew something was off. Her? She knew something was off. I almost laughed, one of those deranged, I need therapy and coffee immediately laughs. She cleared her throat and said, my name is Melissa. I'm Mark's wife. My knees actually went weak. I had to brace myself against the kitchen counter. I didn't scream. I didn't curse. I just said, no, I'm his wife. And then she told me the part that nearly made me drop the phone. He told me he had a twin brother. A mentally unstable twin who lived out of state and needed constant supervision. He said that's why he traveled so much. He said the reason I couldn't video call him was because the brother would get agitated. A twin brother. He really chose the telenovela option. Then she added. And I believed him, because, well, we've been married for 2 years. Everything went fuzzy for a moment. My ears were ringing. I had to sit down because my whole body went cold. 2 years. He hadn't just cheated. He hadn't just lied. He had lived an entire double marriage, overlapping with mine. 2 Thanksgivings. 2 Christmases. 2 wives. 2 sets of excuses. Melissa kept talking, apologizing, crying, and then she said the part that sealed it. He said you were his mentally ill brother's caretaker. That he couldn't leave him alone with you for more than a day or 2. Oh. So, I was the mentally unstable sibling now. Cute. She kept going. And he told me you manipulated him. That you forced him into some weird family obligation marriage, so he couldn't commit to me legally yet. I swear my vision actually blurred. He didn't just lie to her. He made me into a cartoon villain to justify living 2 lives. Then, quietly, she said, I'm sorry. I genuinely didn't know. I thought he was taking care of someone. That's why I supported him financially sometimes. Yep. He took her money too. And while I was processing the fact that my husband was basically a clearance rack con artist, Melissa suddenly gasped. Oh my God. What? He just texted me. He said, boarding now. Love you, Angel. He was literally on his way to her. A whole 1,000-mile trip. With a ring. For his second wife. Me? I was done being calm. When I say Melissa and I teamed up, I don't mean we instantly became trauma-bonded besties who braid each other's hair and cry over ice cream. No. It was more like, so what do? I don't know, but he's not getting away with this. Great. Because I'm furious. Same. We were 2 women united by the same man's unbelievable stupidity. And timing? Perfect. He was literally on a flight to Utah right that second, thinking both of his wives were blissfully clueless. So, while he was sipping his little ginger ale and thinking he was the main character, Melissa and I started putting the puzzle pieces together. And oh boy, did pieces fall fast. Piece number 1, his work trips? Fake. Melissa sent me screenshots. Every conference he told me about was a family emergency he told her about. Every time he said he was helping his unstable brother with paperwork, he was at Melissa's house helping her put together IKEA furniture. Every selfie he sent of hotel rooms? Reverse image searchable. Straight from Google. This man wasn't even good at lying. He was just persistent. Piece number 2, he was broke. Like broke. Melissa said. He told me he was investing in a business. What business, you ask? Apparently mine. To me, he said he was wiring money monthly to help his ailing twin. So basically, he used me as an imaginary charity case to justify being financially useless to his second wife. Piece number 3, he promised both of us he'd move soon. To me. As soon as I'm done helping my brother, we'll move to a bigger place. Maybe near the coast. To Melissa. As soon as I deal with my sister's house, we'll move closer to your family. Sister? We were at twins already. Now, there was a sister? This man was building the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe of imaginary relatives. Piece number 4, he told us opposite things about kids. To me, I'm just not ready yet. Maybe in a few years. To her, I want a baby with you, but she wouldn't let me have one because she's too controlling. The audacity. I don't even want kids. He was the one saying he still feels like a kid inside. Yeah, well, if the shoe fits. Melissa and I decided we needed receipts. All of them. She dug up emails, love letters, photos, screenshots, bank transfers, his fake sister's messages. Everything. I pulled out our marriage certificate, plane tickets, texts, his little notebook of excuses. Yes, he actually writes out his lies because he gets overwhelmed keeping track. This man wasn't just living a double life. He was running a double life spreadsheet. And then came the biggest twist of the day. Melissa whispered, I think he's planning to propose to me again. With a bigger ring. He asked my ring size last week. Y'all. He was going to Utah to propose to his second wife. While still married to me. Not even divorced. Not even separated. No paperwork. Nothing. Just vibes. That was the moment something in me clicked. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I wasn't confused. I was pissed. Focused. Sharp. I said, okay. Then we need to be there when he lands. Melissa gasped. You mean? Oh yes, I said. We're welcoming him home together. I didn't know I had this much adrenaline inside me. I was running around the kitchen grabbing my keys, my charger, a granola bar, like preparing for some emotionally violent road trip. Meanwhile, Melissa was still on the phone whisper crying like she was in a Lifetime movie. Are you sure we should do this? I feel sick. I told her the truth. I feel sick too. But he's been living 2 lives for 2 years. He deserves to face both of them at the same time. And honestly, That sentence alone gave me strength I didn't know I had. The logistics, aka Operation Catch the Clown. His flight was landing in Salt Lake City in 5 hours. Luckily for me, I live in Nevada, close enough to drive it in time if I didn't stop and obey every speed limit. Melissa lived near the airport already. She said she'd drive there early and wait in the arrivals hall. I'd meet her at the gate exits. We were like two divorced wives from a sitcom teaming up to take down the narcissist in episode 10. Except we weren't divorced. And he didn't know this episode was coming. His timing? Poetic. Right as Melissa and I solidified the plan, my phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Landing soon. Miss you, babe. Babe. Sir, you have 2 wives waiting to tear you apart like wishbone turkey. I took a screenshot and sent it to Melissa. She replied. He sent me the same message. 2 wives. Same text. 2 minutes apart. This man used copy, paste on his affection. The drive. I don't usually drive angry. I'm like an 8 under speed limit girl who apologizes to stop signs. But that day, I turned into a fast and furious background character. Every mile, I got angrier. Every cactus I passed, I wanted to throw his suitcase at it. I replayed everything. Every business trip. Every disappearing weekend. Every time he said you're overthinking. Every time he made me feel dramatic. Every lie layered over another lie until our whole life was basically papier-mâché. At one point, I had to pull over because I was shaking. Then Melissa texted me. I'm here. He lands in 45 minutes. And suddenly, I wasn't shaking anymore. I was ready. Arrivals hall. When I finally got to the airport, Melissa spotted me first. She looked exactly like I felt. Drained, furious, too tired to cry anymore. But when we saw each other, we didn't hug. We didn't do a dramatic sob. We just nodded at each other like, let's end this. His flight began unloading. You could feel the tension in the air. Passengers started trickling out. Business guys. A family with 4 screaming kids. A woman with a neck pillow still on. And then, there he was. Wearing the same stupid jacket I bought him last Christmas. Dragging a suitcase Melissa had gifted him. Holding a Starbucks he probably charged to her card. He looked so normal. So relaxed. So ready to continue life as usual. Melissa and I stepped forward at the same time. He froze. And the color left his face so fast it was almost beautiful. He whispered, "Oh no." Melissa crossed her arms. I raised an eyebrow. He blinked rapidly like his brain was buffering. "Wow, what are you 2 doing together here? This is..." I said, "Hi, Mark." Or should I say husband? Melissa added, "Yeah, husband." He looked like a man who just realized the universe had finally collected its debt. And then, he ran. Yep. He actually tried to run. Through an airport. With a suitcase. Like a guilty golden retriever making a break for it. So, picture this. Your 40-year-old husband, a man who can't even jog to the mailbox without wheezing, suddenly sprints through the Salt Lake City airport like he's Jason Bourne. Suitcase bouncing. Backpack slapping him. His stupid jacket flapping open like a cheap cape. And Melissa and I just stood there like, is he serious? He was. He dodged a guy with a stroller, nearly tripped over someone's carry-on, and knocked over an elderly man's luggage. People were staring. Somebody actually yelled, "SIR. You can't run in this area." But Mark? He was committed to this dramatic exit. The universe intervened. His suitcase, the one Melissa bought for him, had a wobbly wheel. The wheel chose right then to pop off. The suitcase jerked sideways. Mark tripped over it. And he ate absolute tile floor. Like face first. Skid noise level fall. It was the most satisfying sound I've ever heard. Melissa muttered, "Good." I whispered, "He deserves carpet burn on his soul." Security moves in. 2 TSA agents were on him before he even got up. "Sir, you cannot run in the airport. Sir, we need you to stay calm." Mark, still sprawled on the floor, squeaked, "I am having a mental episode. My blood sugar. My anxiety. My brother." And one officer actually said, "What brother?" And that was it. I lost the ability to stay silent. "He doesn't have a brother," I said. "Or if he does, it's imaginary, like most of his responsibilities." Melissa chimed in. "He also doesn't have one wife. He has 2. Every head within 30 feet turned. Someone whispered, "Oh my God, is this a TLC show?" I stepped closer. He lied to both of us. He married both of us. He stole money. He built a whole fake family tree. And then he tried to run from us in an airport. Mark, still on the floor, yelled, "That's not true. I didn't marry 2 women. I just. He looked around like the lies were written in the air somewhere. Then he blurted. I was confused. A TSA agent raised an eyebrow. "For 2 years. Mark sputtered. "4 longer." Melissa gasped. "Longer?" The officer sighed, so deeply you could feel the disappointment vibrate through the floor. "Sir, we need all 3 of you to step aside." And that's how we ended up in a small security room with blinding fluorescent lights and Mark sweating like a rotisserie chicken. The interrogation, aka watching Mark collapse under mild pressure. The security guy asked, "What exactly is the issue here?" I said, calm and clear. "He has 2 wives. In 2 states. And he lied to both of us." Melissa nodded and dropped the bomb. "We have marriage certificates." Mark shrieked. "It was an accident." The security guy snorted. Out loud. "You don't accidentally marry 2 people, sir." Mark tried again. "You don't understand. They pressured me." Both Melissa and I spoke at the exact same time. Liar. Mark froze. He knew he was outnumbered, cornered, finished. And the officer leaned back, arms crossed. Sir, bigamy is a crime. You're going to need to cooperate. Mark's eyes went so wide I thought they'd roll out of his skull. He whispered, am I under arrest? And then suddenly, he fainted, just straight up passed out, flopped sideways like a soggy pancake. Melissa groaned. Not this. I just said, drama queen. Security called medical. People gathered. Someone filmed. I hope they got my good side. Mark laid there, unmoving, his life finally cracking open in public. And as paramedics checked his pulse, Melissa whispered to me, I think this is only the beginning. She was right. So while Mark was lying on the floor doing his best impression of a Victorian woman fainting over the price of tea, the paramedics confirmed what I already knew. He was faking it. Not well either. One medic whispered to the TSA agent, he's conscious. He's squeezing his eyes shut. The officer sighed, so loudly it echoed. Sir, please sit up. You're not dying. You're in trouble. Mark opened one eye like a child caught pretending to sleep past bedtime. Is she gone? He whispered. Which she? The officer asked flatly. Mark pointed vaguely in Melissa's direction, then toward me, then toward the ceiling, like maybe he had a third secret wife floating above us as a ghost. He muttered, all of them. The officer said, no. And they're both very angry. Mark sat up very quickly after that. The questions began. The TSA agent took notes while Mark babbled. It's not what it looks like. I didn't mean to, marry two people. I just got overwhelmed, and emotionally vulnerable, and confused, and manipulated. And I cut him off. By who, Mark? Which one of us manipulated you into 2 fully legal weddings? He stuttered like Windows 98 crashing. I thought Utah wasn't the real marriage. The entire room froze. Melissa whispered, excuse me? He swallowed. I thought you needed, like, a special license. Or extra paperwork. I thought my Utah wedding was, like, spiritual. I covered my face with both hands. Mark, you had a courthouse wedding. Melissa added, with witnesses. He shrugged helplessly. I thought those were props. One of the security guards laughed. He literally laughed. Authorities start getting interested. Because here's the thing. Bigamy is a crime. So when 2 wives show up at an airport with matching marriage certificates, yeah, people pay attention. The TSA agent stepped outside and returned with a police officer. A real one. Melissa grabbed my hand under the table. We weren't allies anymore. We were soldiers in the same stupid war. The officer said, Sir, are you aware that marrying 2 people simultaneously is illegal in most states? Mark immediately folded like a cheap lawn chair. It wasn't on purpose. I just forgot. The officer blinked at him. You forgot you were already married? Mark nodded like that was reasonable. I get stressed. My memory is bad. My therapist says I have, situational confusion. I snorted. You don't have a therapist. He corrected himself. Well, I saw a TikTok about self-care. Mark, Melissa cut in, explain why you told me she was your mentally ill brother's caretaker. Mark looked from her to me like he was choosing which way he preferred to die. Then he muttered, I needed a story. Oh, a story. The officer isn't amused. The officer leaned forward. Sir, we're going to need statements from both wives. Mark yelped, wives? Don't say it like that. I crossed my arms. What? You don't like hearing the consequences out loud. Melissa added, maybe you should have thought of that before proposing to me. Twice. Mark's eyes bulged. Twice. She slammed her hand on the table. Yes, twice. You told me you were going to get me a bigger ring next time. The officer scribbled something down and shook his head. This is one of the strangest cases we've had all month. And then, Mark said the most iconic, delusional line of this entire saga. I think we should all take responsibility. Both of us said, excuse me? Mark lifted his hands like he was negotiating peace between warring nations. I mean, maybe none of us are perfect. Maybe we can all learn from this. The officer actually set his clipboard down and stared at him. Sir, you're facing potential charges. Mark froze again. Charges like money charges? No. Legal charges. Mark whispered. Can I faint again? The officer said. No. What happens next? They didn't arrest him right there because they needed statements, paperwork, evidence, the timeline, the whole mess. But they did escort him to another room for further questioning. And the last thing he said before the door closed was, can someone tell my wives to calm down? Both Melissa and I shouted. We're not your wives. It echoed down the hall. Once Mark was escorted into whatever tiny grayish interrogation room the airport police had available, Melissa and I were guided to a different waiting area, one with those plastic chairs that make your spine question its purpose. The second we sat down, Melissa dropped her face into her hands. I feel like my entire life just evaporated. I put a hand on her shoulder. Same here. He didn't just cheat. He built a whole alternate universe. She let out a shaky laugh. Yeah, he's basically a broke Thanos. And that was the moment we stopped being strangers and became a team. The officer comes back with more questions. A female officer joined us with a folder so thick it could have qualified as a textbook. She sat down, crossed her legs, and said, okay, we've got some complicated information. Melissa and I exchanged very concerned looks. The officer opened the folder. There seemed to be discrepancies. Melissa swallowed hard. What kind? The officer tapped the folder. Well, for starters, your husband didn't just lie to each of you. She looked at me. He told Melissa's family that you were his unstable sister-in-law. My jaw dropped. What? I've never even met her family, the officer continued. And he told your family, she said, turning to me, that Melissa was his co-worker who had boundary issues. Melissa stared, wide-eyed. Boundary issues. I've never even met his family. It hit both of us at the same time. He had constructed two separate narratives that explained away each of us to the other side's friends, parents, siblings, co-workers. He had patched the holes with more lies. And filled the holes in those lies with different lies. It was like he was playing whack-a-mole with reality. Financial lies? Oh, you bet. The officer flipped to another section. Next issue, finances. My stomach dropped. Melissa muttered, "Oh no." The officer continued. It appears that Mark has been borrowing money from both families, under different pretenses. Melissa sat up straight. He borrowed from your family too? And then came the kicker. He told his Utah in-laws that he was supporting a sick sibling back home. Melissa whispered, "Oh my God." I leaned forward. He doesn't have a sibling. That was supposed to be me. The officer gave me a look like, "Honey, get ready." And he told your family, she said to me, that he was helping a single mother in Utah who had no one else. Melissa's mouth fell open. I'm the single mother now. I shook my head. No, sweetie. I was the single mother last time. The phone evidence. Then the officer dropped a nuclear bomb on the whole conversation. We got access to his phone. Melissa and I both froze. She took out a stack of printed messages. Messages to us. Messages about us. Messages to other people. Yes. Other people. Plural. The officer slid the top page toward us. Melissa whispered, that can't be. It was a text from Mark to someone named Lila Crescentmoon. It said, I promise I'll come back next month. Things with both my families are complicated. But I'm yours. Always. Melissa gripped the edge of the chair. Both his families? The officer nodded. Ma'am, we believe he may have been seeing at least one other woman. My throat closed. 3. The officer corrected me. We're still looking. But so far, we've identified at least 2 more women he has been talking to romantically. Melissa whispered. He was running for lives? I rubbed my temples. At 40 years old? With chronic back pain? Working 20 hours a week? How? Melissa deadpanned. He probably had a Google Calendar labeled Secret Wives. The officer nodded. He actually did. Both of us snapped our eyes toward her. I'm sorry, I said. What? The officer opened his phone screenshot. A calendar labeled. Family B. Utah trip. Lila days. Do not forget. Cover story. Melissa whispered, horrified. He had color coding. The moment, everything got worse. Then the officer sighed. We're contacting all affected parties. But there's one more thing. Melissa grabbed my hand. The officer said, Mark has used both of your names on legal and financial documents. I felt like the floor moved. Melissa shook her head. No. No. He wouldn't. The officer cut her off. He did. She pulled out another sheet. He opened a credit card under one of your names. Melissa's breath hitched. The officer looked at me, and he listed the other wife as his emergency contact on a mortgage application. I blinked. A mortgage? For what? The officer hesitated. For a condo. In Utah. Melissa whispered. With who? The officer exhaled. We believe with a third woman. Melissa actually stood up and walked in a circle, hands on her head. I stared into space. Mark wasn't just living double lives. He had a double life within his double life. A nesting doll of betrayal. And then the officer added. He's finally talking. And he wants to see one of you. We both answered at the same time. No. The officer came back about 15 minutes later, holding a clipboard and wearing the kind of expression people get right before they say something like, okay, so don't scream. She cleared her throat. All right. Mark has decided to give a statement. Melissa crossed her arms, so tight, she looked shrink-wrapped. I muttered. Oh, great. Let me guess. Aliens abducted him and forced him to get married twice. The officer actually smiled, which terrified me. Well, his explanation is creative. Here we go. We didn't go in the room, so they brought his statement out. The officer sat down across from us and opened the folder again. So, when we asked him why he married 2 women, was seeing other women, and built multiple separate lives. She took a deep breath. He said he did it because he's too nice. Melissa's head snapped up. What? The officer nodded. He claims he didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I just stared at her. He married multiple people because he didn't want to hurt feelings? The officer kept reading. He also said, and I'm quoting, I have a big heart, and it's unfair to ask me to use it on only one person. Melissa slapped her forehead. Oh my God, he thinks he's the Oprah of love. Then came the real excuse. The officer flipped to the next page. And then he said this was all actually because of his mental load. I snorted. His what? She nodded. He says he was overwhelmed and that maintaining one life was too stressful, so maintaining several made it easier. Melissa blinked at her. He said multiple lives made things easier? The officer shrugged sympathetically. I didn't say it made sense. But then she took a breath. And here's the worst part. She turned the page toward us. In his written statement, Mark had added a handwritten note at the bottom. Honestly, I don't think I did anything that wrong. I provided love and stability to multiple women. Some men cheat, I committed. I swear, both Melissa and I levitated from rage. But wait, he had follow-up excuses. The officer continued. When we asked why he told you, she pointed to me, that his Utah wife was his mentally ill brother. I groaned. And why he told Melissa that you were a controlling ex who wouldn't move out. Melissa's jaw dropped. He said that about me? She nodded. He said, again quoting, "Women get dramatic." It was easier to give everyone a simple explanation. Melissa stood up so fast her chair squeaked across the floor. "I'm going to kill him." The officer raised a hand. "Please don't. The paperwork is already a mess." Then, he tried to make himself the victim. The officer flipped to the final page. And he finished by claiming he was actually the one who suffered the most. I whispered. "Of course he did. Of course." She read. "I never had any time for myself. Between all my families, I barely had a day off. I was stretched so thin emotionally. Nobody understands how hard this has been on me." Melissa whispered. He was overwhelmed by his own lies. I shook my head. He's like a cat who knocks over a glass and then cries because the floor is wet. The officer shut the folder. "There's more, but that's the summary." Then she told us the part that froze both of us solid. "He's asked to see one of you." I instantly said, "No." Melissa said, "Absolutely not." But the officer held up a hand. He said he only needs 5 minutes, and he specifically asked for. She paused. "Both of you." Melissa, and I just stared. He wanted to talk to both of us. At the same time. Together. My voice came out strangled. "What does he think this is? A performance review?" The officer sighed. "I'm not saying you have to, but he said he has something to confess, something he didn't put in the statement." Melissa's eyes widened with fear. I felt a cold drop in my stomach. What could possibly be worse than everything we already know? The officer looked at both of us. "I don't know, but he says it changes everything." Melissa, and I followed the officer down a hallway that smelled like old coffee and disinfectant. Every step felt heavier than the last. I didn't know what I expected to find on the other side of that door, but I did not expect him. Mark was sitting at a metal table, hands folded, looking like a middle schooler waiting to be picked up after detention. His hair was a mess, his shirt half-tucked, and he had that same dumb half-smile he uses when he's about to say the stupidest sentence in human history. When he saw us, he perked up. "Hey girls." "Girls." Melissa whispered to me. "I'm going to throw him out the window." He started with a deep, dramatic sigh. Mark leaned back in the chair like he was preparing for his TED Talk. "Look, I know things look bad." I laughed out loud. "Mark, you're literally being held for questioning for having 2 wives. 2. He waved his hand. "Allegedly." Melissa slammed her hand on the table. "Mark, we have marriage certificates." He winced. "Okay, well, those aren't like binding. We both stared at him. He tried again. "Not emotionally binding, I mean." And then he hit us with a confession. He put his hands together like he was praying. "Okay, so there's something I didn't say in the statement because I didn't want the cops to overreact." Melissa groaned. "Oh God." He glanced at the officer watching through the window, then lowered his voice. "I wasn't just married to 2 women. I froze." Melissa froze. He swallowed. "I was engaged to a 3rd. Melissa's voice cracked up an octave. "A 3rd what?" "A 3rd woman," he whispered. I swear the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. He kept talking too fast. "She's from Nevada. Totally chill girl. Doesn't like drama. Super sweet. I was gonna tell both of you about her eventually." Melissa choked. "Tell us what?" Mark stuck out his bottom lip, defensive. "That I didn't choose either of you. I was planning to move there." Then he drops the next bomb like he's announcing a raffle prize. "And, she thinks I'm a firefighter." I blinked. "You what? You? A firefighter?" "I could totally be one," he said, offended. "I did 1 CrossFit class." Melissa laughed so hard, she had to bend forward. "You cough when you walk upstairs." He ignored her. "I told her I work 48-hour shifts. That's why I disappear. It's not weird." I stared at him, speechless. He kept going. "And she thinks I have a kid." Melissa whispered, horrified. "Where did you get a kid?" Mark shrugged. "I said I had 1. She didn't ask for pictures." The officer stepped in, and even as she looked done. The door opened, and the officer leaned in, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Mark, you cannot just invent children while committing bigamy." He crossed his arms like a toddler. "Why not? It made things easier." I whispered to Melissa. "He should tattoo that on his forehead." And then he said the words that made my stomach drop. Mark leaned toward us again. "There's one more thing. The real thing." Melissa yelled. "What more could there possibly be?" He swallowed hard. "I, might have used both your names on some forms." My blood turned cold. "What forms?" He whispered. "Insurance." I froze. Melissa froze. The officer's head snapped toward him. "What kind of insurance?" He suddenly looked very small. "Life insurance." My heart climbed into my throat. The officer stepped fully into the room, voice sharp now. "Mark, are you telling me you took out multiple life insurance policies using their names, without their consent?" He squeaked. "Possibly." Melissa backed up like she'd seen a ghost. I felt my pulse in my teeth. This wasn't just lies. This wasn't just cheating. This was dangerous. Very, very dangerous. Mark looked between us, panicking. But like, in a loving way. The officer shouted. "There is no loving way to do insurance, fraud, and bigamy." Mark sat there, wringing his hands, mumbling about miscommunication. Melissa grabbed my arm. "We're done. We are so done." And yet, I could tell from the officer's face. Things were about to get way worse before they got better. Walking out of that interrogation room felt like stepping out of a tornado just to realize the whole damn building is also on fire. Melissa, and I barely made it 3 steps down the hallway before a second officer jogged after us. Ma'ams, we need you both to stay. I turned around slowly.
Why?
We didn't do anything. He gave this tired, apologetic half-smile. The kind cops give right before telling you your day is about to get much worse. It's not that you did anything, it's that Mark used your names on several documents. We need to determine if you were knowingly involved. Melissa's jaw dropped. Knowingly involved? Sir, I didn't even know he could read. He nodded sympathetically. Unfortunately, that's exactly why we have to ask a few more questions. They separated us, which immediately made me panic because suddenly it felt like I was the one under investigation. The officer brought me into a smaller room, dimly lit, with a buzzing light that made everything feel like one of those crime documentaries where the girlfriend claims she didn't know. I sat down, hands in my lap, trying not to look guilty of something I didn't even know existed. The officer placed a folder on the table, a thick, miserable thing, and slid it toward me. Do you recognize these? Inside were copies of joint financial forms with my signature forged, an insurance policy listing me as the contact, a document claiming I had transferred funds, and, cherry on top, a fake letter from me, giving Mark permission to handle my accounts. My stomach turned.
No.
I never signed any of this. He nodded. We suspected as much. There are inconsistencies in the handwriting, but we needed to hear it directly from you. Then he paused. Are you aware of a woman named Lacey? My heart skipped. Melissa mentioned her. The Utah wife. He corrected me.
No.
That's the Utah wife. There's also Lacey, the fiancée from Nevada. My mouth went dry. There's a third?
Yes.
And she's the one who contacted us. She received suspicious documents too. That's how this all started. Meanwhile, in the other room, I learned this later. Melissa told me everything. Another officer asked her, Ms. Melissa, did you know Mark listed you as a dependent on his taxes? She blinked. What? I pay his phone bill. Then, are you aware he listed you as his next of kin for a company you've never worked for? Melissa, what company? He barely works at his own job. But the worst part, the officer showed her a copy of the same fake letter I'd been shown, except hers said SHE gave Mark permission to handle her finances. Melissa apparently stood up, so fast the chair screeched across the floor. That man couldn't handle a checkout line. I would never. And then came the bombshell question. My officer leaned forward. There is one more form we need to ask you about. It's serious. He slid it out like it weighed 10 pounds. Mark had taken out a joint credit line with a woman's name on it. Not mine. Not Melissa's. Not Utah wife. Not Nevada fiancé. A fourth name. I stared at it, throat tight. Who is she? The officer sighed. We're still trying to figure that out. My stomach twisted into a knot. Mark wasn't just living double lives. He wasn't even living triple lives. This man was collecting women like expired coupons, useless, expired, and just shoved in every corner of his life with no purpose. The officer looked at me very seriously. We need you to be careful. Men who commit this level of fraud often escalate. That sentence hit me like ice water. Escalate how? He shook his head gently. Financially. Emotionally. Sometimes physically. It's not uncommon for people living multiple fake identities to panic and make dangerous choices. I felt my whole body go cold. This wasn't just a cheating husband. This wasn't even just bigamy. Mark had built an entire collapsing universe of lies, and all of us were trapped inside it. Then the officer told me something I'll never forget. Your husband is terrified the women in his life will connect the dots. When individuals like him lose control of their lives. He closed the folder. They can become unpredictable.
My heart hammered in my chest.
Unpredictable.
Mark.
The man who once tried to fix a light bulb by twisting the lamp instead of the bulb. The man who thought Utah was next to Texas. The man who couldn't remember our anniversary but could apparently recite fake social security numbers across state lines. That man was now labeled unpredictable by law enforcement. And that was the moment I realized. This story wasn't anywhere close to over. Asterisk. Melissa, and I thought we were dealing with a lying husband. A cheating jerk. A manipulative clown. But this was something deeper, darker, and far more dangerous. The officer stood. We're going to ask you to stay in town for a few days. You may both be needed again. I swallowed hard. What about Mark? He looked toward the interrogation room. He's not going anywhere. But somehow, that didn't make me feel safer. Not even a little. The next morning, the police station called both Melissa and me back in. Neither of us had slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that folder of forged documents. My name, her name, fake signatures, fake letters, fake lives. Melissa picked me up in her car, gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles were white. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. We were both replaying every moment of the last 2 years, every weird excuse Mark made, every sudden trip, every inconsistency we brushed off. When we arrived, the lobby was busier than usual. Officers moved with purpose. Phones rang constantly, and there was this strange tension in the air that immediately put me on edge. Then I saw her. A woman in her early 30s, hair pulled into a neat bun, wearing a tailored coat and clutching a folder to her chest like it was the only stability she had left. She was crying silently, not messy, not dramatic, just quietly breaking. You could tell she was exhausted, confused, and angry all at once. The Utah wife. She looked up at us and somehow instinctively knew. Her eyes widened, and she pressed a hand to her mouth. You're the others. It wasn't a question, just a sad realization spoken aloud. Melissa nodded stiffly. I just swallowed, too overwhelmed to speak. The utter collapse of Mark's fake life. The officers brought us into a small conference room, the kind used for paperwork, not interrogations. But this time, there were 3 folders on the table. One for each of us. The Utah wife, her name was Diana, opened hers immediately. Pages rustled as she scanned through. I watched her face morph through disbelief, rage, heartbreak, and finally a kind of numb acceptance. He told me, she said quietly, that he had a mentally ill brother he had to care for. He said that's why he traveled so much. He said that's why he couldn't have kids. He said that's why he couldn't take me to meet his family, because they were too judgmental. She shook her head slowly. I thought he was a good man. A stressed man, but a good one.
I didn't know what to say.
There was nothing comforting to offer. We were all victims of the same idiot with too many lies and too little brain. Then came the evidence, none of us expected. A detective entered and placed another stack of documents on the table, thicker than any of ours. These, he said, are the financial records connecting all 3 of you to Mark's accounts.
He clicked a pen.
We've discovered he was funneling money between states using your names. In some cases, he pretended you were all related. In others, he claimed one of you was deceased. I felt sick. Diana clutched her chest. Melissa muttered, I'm going to set his car on fire when this is over. The detective continued, turning pages calmly, as though recounting everyday details instead of unraveling a man's entire web of insanity. He listed each of you as beneficiaries on overlapping life insurance policies. Additionally, he appears to have taken out a loan using Ms. Diana's information and attempted to open a credit card under Ms. Melissa's. I couldn't breathe. And me? I finally asked, voice barely audible. The detective placed his hand on my folder. He forged your signature to authorize medical decisions. As if you were incapacitated. That one broke me. He planned to have access to my legal identity if something happened to me. Something that he could have staged. Suddenly the officer from yesterday didn't feel dramatic when she said, men who escalate. Mark wasn't just a liar. He wasn't just a cheat. He was dangerous. Then we learned why everything fell apart now. Diana spoke up. He slipped up, she said, voice tight. He told me he'd be gone for 3 days because of a family emergency. Then he posted a photo on his social media, a diner selfie with a timestamp. She looked between us. He told both of you something different that day, didn't he? Melissa nodded. He said he was at a work seminar. I nodded too. He told me he was with his dad. Diana exhaled deeply. I knew something was wrong. I reported a missing persons alert. Then the finances surfaced. It was like watching dominoes fall. 2 years of lies collapsing in a single week. And just when we thought it was the end, a uniformed officer entered abruptly. We need the 3 of you to stay longer. We're transferring Mark to a different holding room. He's showing signs of agitation. That word again. Agitation. Unpredictability. Escalation. The officer cleared her throat. And he keeps asking for all 3 of you. A shiver went up my spine. Melissa grabbed my hand under the table. Diana whispered, God, what does he want now? The officer didn't blink. He says he has a confession to make. But he'll only say it with all of you present. My blood ran cold. Whatever was coming next, it was going to be the worst part yet. We waited in that cramped conference room for what felt like an hour, though it was probably closer to 15 minutes. No one spoke. Even Melissa, who usually coped with rage by narrating her violent fantasies, stayed silent. Diana just stared at the table, tears drying on her cheeks. I kept pacing because sitting still made me feel trapped. Every time footsteps passed the door, my stomach clenched. We all knew something was coming. None of us knew what. And the way the officers said he was agitated didn't exactly inspire confidence. Finally, a detective stepped inside and gestured for us to follow. They're moving him now, he said. We'll take you to the interview room once he's settled. We walked down a hallway that felt too long and too bright. The air was heavy. Officers murmured to each other in low tones, glancing our way like we were pieces of a puzzle they hadn't finished assembling. When we reached the viewing room, the little window looking into the interview space, the detective paused and lowered his voice. He's in a mood. I wasn't sure what that meant, but then I looked through the glass. Mark was sitting at the metal table, bouncing one knee so fast it looked like he was trying to power a generator. His eyes were wide, darting around the room. His hair was sticking up. His shirt was half unbuttoned. He looked less like someone in trouble and more like someone who'd been awake for 3 days making conspiracy charts out of napkins. Diana inhaled sharply. Melissa scoffed. I felt my hands start to shake. Why does he look like he's been electrocuted? Melissa muttered. The detective ignored the comment. He refuses to talk until the 3 of you are in the room. I whispered, why us? He replied, because whatever he's hiding, he seems to think it involves all of you. That didn't comfort me at all. They brought us in one by one. I walked first, heart pounding so loud it felt like the whole room could hear it. Mark looked up immediately, eyes lighting up like some deranged toddler seeing the babysitter he likes.
Oh.
Good, everyone's here, he said, clapping his hands together once like we were starting a group project. No one sat. The 3 of us just stood there, a barrier of betrayed women waiting for whatever fresh hell he was about to unleash. He took a dramatic breath, preparing for some grand reveal, and the detective behind us folded his arms. Mark, he said firmly, tell them what you told us. Mark nodded, tapping the table with jittery fingers. Okay.
So,
you know how everyone thinks I was juggling? Like, lying about my brother and the marriages and the finances and all that? Melissa snapped. Yes, Mark, we know. He raised a hand dramatically, as if silencing an audience. Well, actually, that's not fully accurate. We all stared at him. He leaned forward, lowering his voice like he expected us to gasp. Because there wasn't just 2 lives. Diana stiffened. I felt my stomach twist. Melissa whispered, don't you dare. Mark swallowed. There were more. Silence. He kept talking, unstoppable now. I wasn't just married twice. And I wasn't just engaged once. There were other relationships, other arrangements, other commitments. He rubbed his forehead like this admission was stressing him out. I didn't mean for it to get so complicated. I kept meeting people who needed me. Melissa nearly lunged across the table. The detective stepped between them. Needed you, she hissed. They needed you? Or you needed attention? Diana whispered. How many? Mark looked up like a kid caught with stolen candy. 5. I blinked. 5 what?
5 women, he said.
Across different states. Not counting you 3. Something inside me dropped straight through the floor. Diana covered her mouth again. Melissa took a step back, eyes wide in disbelief. 5 women. 5 more lies. 5 more versions of him out there somewhere. All tangled up in fake names, fake stories, fake everything. And then he added, almost proudly. They all think I'm someone different. The detective slammed a file on the table. And that, he said sharply, is why this is not just a bigamy case anymore. Mark flinched. He looked up at us again, sheepish, as if asking for sympathy. I just didn't know how to stop. The room felt colder suddenly, like all the air had been sucked out. This wasn't just a cheating husband. This wasn't even just a liar. This was a man who built entire alternate realities and trapped people inside them. I didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning of the unraveling. And the worst part? We weren't done. Not even close. The detective pulled out a chair for each of us, insisting we sit before things escalated further. I didn't like the phrasing, not after everything we'd already heard. Melissa sat stiffly, arms crossed so tightly she looked like she might snap her own ribs. Diana sat delicately, like she was afraid the chair would crumble under her. I sat because my legs simply couldn't hold me anymore. Mark watched all 3 of us with this strange mix of guilt and excitement, almost like he felt important, like he enjoyed the attention, even if it was the worst possible kind. The detective opened the thickest folder yet, the one he'd refused to show us earlier. And the moment he did, I knew why. Inside was a map. A literal map. With pins. So many pins. Each one labeled with initials, different initials, spread across multiple states. Diana gasped. Melissa whispered. Oh hell no. I just stared. The detective tapped the table. These are the other women. The ones he's been contacting, visiting, and in some cases living with under different names. Mark cleared his throat loudly. I was doing research, he said, like we were stupid for not understanding. Emotional research. You know, to figure out what kind of partner I wanted to be. Melissa's jaw dropped so hard it could have cracked the floor. Emotional research? Mark, you were marrying people. He shrugged helplessly. I get committed really fast. It's a flaw. And oh, Melissa snapped. Cheating is a flaw. Double marriages are a crime. Multiple identities across state lines are a federal. The detective held up a hand. She's right. Mark frowned like he was the one being unfairly criticized. I just didn't want to disappoint anyone. I couldn't help it. I actually laughed, though it came out more like a broken exhale. You didn't want to disappoint anyone? Mark, you lied to every woman you met. You used our names for loans. You forged signatures. You pretended your own brother didn't exist. He shook his head. No, I said I had a brother. Just not the right one. Even the detective sighed. Diana spoke for the first time since his confession. What was I to you? Who was I? Mark hesitated. For once, he looked almost human, like the weight of his lies finally pressed on him in a way he couldn't dodge. You were home. Her breath caught. And us? Melissa asked, voice sharp. He looked at her. You were fun. Then he turned to me, guilt flickering across his face like a dying light. And you were stability. My stomach twisted. He wasn't describing love. He was describing utilities. We weren't partners. We were services he used. Before any of us could speak, another officer walked into the room carrying a tablet. We found something else. The detective took the tablet, tapped the screen, then turned it toward us. It was a video. Grainy security footage. Mark at a storage unit facility. Unlocking a door. Turning on a light. Inside were boxes. Stacks of them. Shelves. Binders. Entire walls of organized folders. Each one labeled with a woman's name. My name. Melissa's name. Diana's name. Names we didn't recognize. The detective zoomed in on a row of binders. Inside were printouts of our social media. Copies of IDs. Bank statements. Photos. Receipts. Notes about arguments. Schedules. Highlighted habits. Lists of what she believes. And dates, so many dates. My skin crawled. It wasn't just creepy. It was obsessive. Melissa covered her mouth. Oh my God, he was tracking us. Diana whispered. He built files on us. Like case studies. Mark piped up suddenly. Yeah, but that's just so I wouldn't mix things up. Silence. Deep, suffocating silence. The detective turned to him. You understand this looks like stalking, right? Mark frowned like we were being dramatic. It's not stalking if you're married. The detective wrote something down slowly. That is absolutely not how it works. I felt sick. More than sick, violated. Every fight, every moment, every detail of my life cataloged. For years,